The morning light came through the kitchen window the way it always did on October mornings in Virginia, soft, golden, unhurried. I was standing at the counter making my second cup of coffee when my phone buzzed. I glanced down, expecting a message from my book club about the meeting time. Instead, it was my daughter-in-law's name on the screen. I set the coffee mug down and answered, "Hello, sweetheart. I need to talk to you." Her voice had that clipped, tight quality I had come to recognize over the years, the tone she used when she wanted something, and was already angry that she hadn't gotten it yet. "My card was declined at Nordstrom this morning." I waited. She said nothing else, as if this sentence alone was supposed to explain everything, as if my silence was the problem. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said carefully. "Did you call your bank?" "It wasn't my card," she said. "It was the joint account, your account." I tried to transfer, and it said access denied. The morning light still came through the window. The coffee still smelled the same, but something in the air shifted. "I know," I said. There was a pause. A long one. "What do you mean, you know?" "I removed your access yesterday afternoon," I said. "I should have done it a long time ago." The silence on her end lasted about 4 seconds. Then she said, very quietly, "You need to fix this today." She hung up. I stood there for a moment with the phone in my hand. Then I picked up my coffee, walked to the sunroom, and sat down in the chair where I used to sit with my husband on Sunday mornings. I looked out at the yard. The oak tree he planted the year our son was born was losing its leaves. They floated down one at a time, slow and certain. I had 63 years of living behind me. I had buried my parents, buried my husband, raised a son on my own for the last 12 years. I had worked for 31 years as a hospital administrator, managed budgets in the millions, negotiated contracts, handled crises at 2 in the morning. I was not a woman who could be undone by a phone call before 9 a.m., but I will tell you honestly, it still hurt. Not the phone call, the years that led to it. Let me go back to where this really started. My husband passed away 3.5 years ago, pancreatic cancer, 14 months from diagnosis to the end. When he died, I was 60 years old, and I had never, in my adult life, managed finances completely alone. He had always handled the investment accounts, the taxes, the long-term planning. I handled the household, my own salary, our day-to-day, but the big picture that was his domain, and I had been comfortable letting it be. After he died, my son came to me. He sat at this same kitchen table, and he held my hand, and he said, "Mom, I don't want you to be alone in this. Let me help you. Let me be here for you the way Dad would have wanted." He was 37 years old. He had a good job in project management. He had married my daughter-in-law 4 years earlier. I had always kept a careful distance from her. Not cold, but measured. There was something about her that had always made me feel slightly off balance. Slightly as though I were auditioning for a role I had not agreed to play. But my son loved her, and I loved my son, so I extended every courtesy I had. When he asked if he could be added to my primary checking account just as a secondary holder, just so he could help me with transfers and bills if I ever needed it, I said, yes. He was my only child. My husband was gone. It seemed like the natural thing to do. That was my first mistake. For the first few months, nothing changed. My son was attentive and kind. He came by on Sundays. He helped me sort through his father's paperwork. He called every few days to check in. My daughter-in-law was not particularly warm, but she was polite. She came to Sunday dinners. She complimented my house in that slightly formal way that means nothing but is easy to accept. The first transfer happened 8 months after my husband died. I noticed it when I was reviewing my statement something. I started doing more carefully once I was managing everything alone. A transfer of $800 to an account I didn't recognize. I called my son immediately. "Oh, that was me," he said. "I'm sorry. I should have mentioned it. Our water heater went out last week, and we were a little short that pay period. I was going to pay you back by the 15th. I believed him. He was my son. The water heater was a real thing. He sent me a photo of it. I told him not to worry about paying me back, just to please let me know before making any transfers going forward. He said, of course. The next transfer was $1,200 2 months later. He texted me the morning it happened. Mom, I borrowed a little, will explain Sunday. Love you. Sunday came. He explained it was a car repair. He mentioned paying it back. He never did. I want to be very clear about something. I am not a foolish woman. I am not naive. I have a master's degree. I ran a department of 40 people. I know how to read a room, but grief changes the way you process things. After my husband died, there was a long period, longer than I want to admit, where my brain was simply not operating at full capacity. I don't mean I was confused or incapacitated. I mean the part of my mind that would normally have sounded an alarm was quieter than usual. I was exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. I was lonely, and my son was the person who sat with me in that loneliness. That is how it works, I have come to understand. It does not happen in one dramatic moment. It happens in dozens of small moments that each seem forgivable on their own. By the end of the first year, I had given, and I use that word precisely because I am certain now it was never a loan, approximately $14,000, car repairs, a medical bill, a work trip where my son forgot his corporate card, 2 months of what he called breathing room while they waited for a bonus. I said something to him in the spring of that second year. We were sitting in the kitchen, and I had the bank statements on the table, and I said, I need to talk to you about the account. He listened. He was good at listening. He had his father's eyes, and his father's way of making you feel fully heard, even as he was already planning what he would say next. Mom, he said, I know it's been a lot. Things have been tighter than I expected this year, but we're getting on top of it. You know I would never take advantage of you. I know that, I said. And I did believe it. In that moment. I did. Can we just get through the summer? He said. My review is in August. There's a real chance of a significant raise. I said we would get through the summer. The summer came and went. The raise, he told me in September, was smaller than expected, but they were being more careful now. He promised. What I did not fully understand yet was the role my daughter-in-law was playing in all of this. I began to piece it together slowly, the way you piece together something you did not want to see. A comment she made at dinner about a spa weekend she had just taken with her sister. A photo on her social media of a handbag I recognized as expensive. My son mentioning, offhandedly, that she had been stressed lately and that he had wanted to do something nice for her. I started keeping a separate notebook. I wrote down every transfer, every mention of money, every explanation I was given. I had not kept records like this before because I had trusted completely. I kept them now because I was beginning to understand that trust and documentation are not the same thing, and that love, even genuine love, does not make you immune to being used. By the 18-month mark, the total was $31,000. I sat with that number for a long time. $31,000. That was not a water heater. That was not an unexpected car repair. That was a pattern. I did not confront my son again. Not yet. I had confronted him once, gently, and he had answered with warmth and promises and had changed nothing. I had learned something important from that experience. A direct conversation, without leverage, produces only more promises. So I did something different. I called an attorney. Her name was Patricia, and she had been recommended to me by a colleague who had navigated her own complicated inheritance situation a few years earlier. Patricia was in her mid-50s, matter-of-fact, and completely without sentiment about money. I liked her immediately. I told her everything. The account access, the transfers, the notebook, the 3.5 years of watching the balance of my retirement savings erode while my son's wife posted photos of beach vacations. Patricia listened without interrupting. When I finished, she set down her pen and said, "Okay, here's what we're going to do. Over the next 6 weeks, while my son and daughter-in-law believed everything was normal, I moved methodically. Patricia helped me restructure my accounts. My primary checking, the one my son had access to, was reduced to a minimal balance. my savings, my investments, the accounts tied to my pension and my husband's life insurance. Everything of substance was moved or restructured in ways that my son's name did not touch. A revocable trust was established. I became, on paper, a much less accessible target. I also gathered documentation. Every statement for the past 3 years. A clear accounting, in Patricia's professional opinion, of what had been taken. I want to pause here and tell you something about those 6 weeks. They were some of the hardest weeks I have experienced since my husband's final months. Not because of the legal work Patricia handled that efficiently. Hard because of what I was doing while I did it. Every Sunday, my son still came to dinner. I still cooked. My daughter-in-law still sat at my table and ate my food and talked about her plans for redecorating their living room. I still smiled. I still asked about her sister's children. I still sent my son home with leftovers in containers his father had bought at a kitchen store in North Carolina 20 years ago. I was doing what I needed to do. But I was doing it with a broken heart. The morning everything came to a head was a Wednesday. I had removed my daughter-in-law's transfer access the previous afternoon. A quiet, technical adjustment Patricia had advised as the final step before we moved to the formal conversation. I had expected it might take a day or two before anyone noticed. It took less than 18 hours. After my daughter-in-law's call ended, I sat in the sunroom for about 20 minutes. Then I sent 2 text messages. The first was to Patricia. It's today. The second was to my son. I need you to come over this afternoon. I need to talk to both of you. He replied within minutes. Is everything okay? Vivian said. There was an issue with the account. I'm fine, I wrote back. Please come at 2. They arrived at 1:52. My daughter-in-law walked in ahead of my son, which was not unusual. She had a quality I had observed many times, a way of moving through a space, as if it already belonged to her. She sat down at the kitchen table without being invited to sit. My son came in behind her, his expression caught somewhere between concern and something else. I could not entirely read. I had made tea. I do not know why I made tea. Some habits are older than conflict. Mom, my son said, what's going on? I sat down across from them. I had the folder Patricia had prepared on the table in front of me. I did not open it yet. I want to tell you both something, I said, and I want to get through it before anyone responds. Can we do that? My daughter-in-law's jaw was already tight, but she nodded. Over the past 3 years, I said, a total of $47,000 has been transferred out of my account. I have the documentation here, every transaction. Dated, with the account it went to. I touched the folder but still did not open it. I kept quiet for a long time because I wanted to believe the explanations I was given. I also kept quiet because I was grieving, and I was not at my sharpest. And I think both of you understood that about me better than I understood it about myself. My son opened his mouth. I held up one hand. I said before anyone responds. I said, please. He closed his mouth. I have spent the past 6 weeks working with an attorney, I said. My accounts have been restructured. Your access to my primary account has been removed permanently. The documentation you see in this folder has been reviewed by my attorney, and as of yesterday morning, shared with one other person outside this room. I let that land for a moment. What happens next is up to the 2 of you. My daughter-in-law spoke first. She had a talent for that, for being the one who spoke first, who set the frame, who controlled the temperature of a room. This is unbelievable, she said. We are your family. We have been here for you for 3 years while you've been struggling. And now you're sitting here with a lawyer like we're criminals? I'm sitting here with documentation, I said. Those were loans, my son said. His voice was different from his wife's. Hers was sharp. His was pained, which was worse. Mom, you know those were loans. We were going to pay you back. I would like that in writing, I said. Patricia, my attorney, has drafted a repayment agreement. It outlines the $47,000, a reasonable timeline, and a modest interest rate that reflects the period during which the money was unavailable to me. I am not going to court. I am not going to the police. I am offering you the opportunity to make this right between us. Privately. In writing, my daughter-in-law stood up. She was not a small woman, and she had a way of using her height when she was angry. You had a lawyer draw up papers against your own son. I had a lawyer draw up papers that protect me, I said. There is a difference. I cannot believe this, she said. She looked at my son. Are you going to let her talk to us this way? My son was looking at the table. He had the expression of a man who was seeing something he had spent a long time avoiding. I had raised him. I knew his face better than I knew almost anything in the world, and I could see that somewhere underneath the shock and the defensiveness, he knew. He had always known. How long have you been planning this? He asked quietly. 6 weeks, I said, but I have been aware of the problem for much longer than that. There was a silence that lasted a long time. My daughter-in-law was still standing. She picked up her bag. She said something to my son under her breath that I was not meant to hear and probably should not repeat. Then she walked to the front door and opened it and stood there, waiting. My son looked at me. There was something moving through his eyes that I recognized, and it cost me more than I can tell you to hold his gaze without flinching. I love you, I said. That has not changed, but I will not allow this to continue. He stood up slowly. He walked to the door. He stopped with his hand on the frame and turned back once, and I thought for a moment he was going to say something that would have cracked me open entirely, but he didn't. He just looked at me for a long moment, and then he left. I heard the car back out of the driveway. I heard it drive away. I sat at the kitchen table for a while. I did not cry right away. I looked at the folder in front of me, at the oak tree out the window, at the 2 cups of tea I had poured that no one had touched. Then I cried. Thoroughly. For about 15 minutes. Then I washed my face, called Patricia, and told her how the conversation had gone. How do you feel? She asked. Like I did the right thing, I said. And like it cost me something. I'm not sure I can get back. Those 2 things, she said, are not mutually exclusive. That was 3 months ago. A lot has happened in 3 months. My son called me 10 days after that afternoon. He did not bring my daughter-in-law. He came alone, stood on my porch, and asked if he could come in. I made coffee. We sat at the kitchen table again, in the same chairs. He looked like he had not slept well. He said, I need to tell you that I knew what was happening. Not all of it. I didn't know the full amount until you showed me. But I knew it was more than I told you. And I let it happen because it was easier than dealing with it. He looked at his hands. That's not an excuse. I'm telling you because you deserve to hear it said out loud. I had waited years to hear something like that. And now that I heard it, I found that I didn't feel the triumph I might have expected. I felt something more complicated and more quiet. Thank you for saying that, I said. He signed the repayment agreement 2 weeks later. My daughter-in-law did not sign it. My son was the account holder, so legally, only his signature was required. Patricia was very clear about that from the beginning. The payments began the first of the following month. They are modest, but they are consistent. I do not know what conversations happen in their house about this. I have decided that is not mine to know. What I do know is my own life, which I have been tending to with more deliberate care these past months than I have in years. I went back to the water aerobics class I used to attend with a friend before my husband got sick. I cleared out the spare bedroom I had been using as storage since he passed and turned it into something I have needed for a long time. A room with a comfortable chair and a good lamp and shelves for books. A room that is entirely mine. I booked a trip to Savannah in February with 2 women I have known for 40 years, and I have not canceled it, which is something I would have done 3 years ago without even thinking about it. I will not pretend that things with my son are repaired. They are not fully. We talk on the phone. We have had dinner twice, just the 2 of us, at a restaurant, neutral ground. There is a careful quality to our relationship now, a deliberateness that was not there before. I do not know yet if that is the beginning of something rebuilt or the careful management of something that was broken. I am willing to find out. What I am not willing to do, what I will never do again, is make myself small to make someone else comfortable. I spent 3 years doing that, and it did not protect my relationship with my son. It did not earn me my daughter-in-law's respect or gratitude. It cost me $47,000, and a version of myself I am only now beginning to recover. I know there are women listening to this who are in the middle of something similar. Maybe it's money. Maybe it's something else. Maybe it's a living situation that doesn't serve you, or a relationship where you do all the giving and absorb all the consequences, or a version of yourself you can barely recognize anymore. I want to say this as plainly as I can. You are allowed to stop. You are allowed to consult a professional before you say a word to anyone else. You are allowed to take 6 quiet weeks and move methodically and protect yourself before the conversation even happens. That is not cold. That is not a betrayal of love. That is wisdom, and it is available to you at any age. I am 63 years old. I have a room full of books and a trip to Savannah and a repayment agreement that is being honored 1 month at a time. I have a relationship with my son that is honest in a way it was not before. Even if that honesty is sometimes uncomfortable to sit with, I have my own name on my own accounts. I have my husband's oak tree out the window. I have mornings like this one, quiet and golden, with good coffee and enough sense to know the difference between what I can afford to give and what I cannot afford to lose. That is enough. It is more than enough. If you're still watching, I want to hear from you. Tell me what city or state you're watching from, and tell me what would you have done. And if you've been through something like this yourself, please share it in the comments. You never know who needs to hear that they are not alone in this. Take care of yourself. I will see you in the next story.